A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said to the chief priests and the elders of the people, "Hear another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard, put a hedge around it, dug a winepress in it, and built a tower. Then he leased it to tenants and went on a journey. When vintage time drew near, he sent his servants to the tenants to obtain his produce. But the tenants seized the servants, and one they beat, another they killed, and a third they stoned. Again, he sent other servants, more numerous than the first ones, but they treated them in the same way. Finally, he sent his son to them, thinking, 'They will respect my son.' But when the tenants saw the son, they said to one another, 'This is the heir. Come, let us kill him and acquire his inheritance.' They seized him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. What will the owner of the vineyard do to those tenants when he comes?" They answered him, "He will put those wretched men to a wretched death and lease his vineyard to other tenants who will give him the produce at the proper times." Jesus said to them, "Did you never read in the scriptures, 'The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. By the Lord has this been done, and it is wonderful in our eyes.' Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people that will produce its fruit." In the parable of the wicked tenants, Jesus talks about an owner who grows a vineyard and then leases it to tenants. These tenants were to take care of the vineyard and grow produce. The owner sends servants to obtain the produce, but they beat, kill, and stone them so they could keep the produce for themselves. Eventually, the owner sends the son as a last-ditch effort to obtain the produce. The tenants kill the son in hopes of acquiring his inheritance. After this constant disobedience, the owner puts them to death and brings in new tenants who obey the owner and give the produce at the proper time. This parable is once again directed at the Sadducees, i.e. the chief priests, and their close partners, the elders. Specifically, God is the landowner of the vineyard, i.e. the temple. The Sadducees are the tenants who are not taking care of the vineyard. Rather than running the temple the way God wanted it run, they were not practicing what they preached. They might have looked the part, but it was more of a way to inflate their image and their ego. Furthermore, instead of aligning themselves with God, they used the temple as a place to align themselves and collaborate with the Roman Empire and its leadership. As a result, the Jews viewed the Sadducees as being in cahoots with the Roman Empire, leading many of them to question how they did their jobs as tenants of the temple. As John Dominic Crossan so elegantly states, try and imagine the temple for what it was. It was both the house of God and the seat of collaboration. It was the high priest, Caiaphas, who had to collaborate with the Roman occupation. Now, how would Jesus, as a Galilean peasant, see the temple? I think with ferocious ambiguity. On the one hand, it was the seat of God, and you would die to defend it from, say, a Roman emperor like Caligula putting a statue in there. But what would you do when it was also the place where Caiaphas collaborated with the Romans? Was the temple really the house of God anymore? So when Jesus tells this parable, he is subtly calling into question the relationship, i.e., the cooperation of the Sadducees with the Roman Empire. Were they really serving as tenants for the vineyard of God or the vineyard of the Roman Empire? For Matthew's community, you could pretty much apply the same formula to the Pharisees and replace the temple with the synagogues. The destruction of the temple around the year 70 AD resulted in a void in the Jewish community, which would result in the rise of the synagogues. The ones who were in charge of the synagogues, moreover, were the Pharisees. As a result, they became Matthew's biggest opponents, since they by and large didn't accept Jesus as the Messiah. Moreover, Matthew's community identified with this parable because they didn't believe the Pharisees were good tenants of the synagogues. As such, the better tenants to replace them would be the Jewish Christians. And for us, the parable of the wicked tenants can easily be applied. God is the owner of the vineyard of creation. How are we taking care of it? Are we producing much fruit? Or do we choose to align ourselves with the vineyard of the world? In addition, do we take time to care for the poor and the destitute? Or are we too busy focusing on love of money, wanting to become rich and famous, or even blaming the beggar for being poor because they don't want to work? In the end, when God sends Jesus to collect our produce, will we have anything to give? Or will he be left empty-handed?